Recognizing and managing anxiety around intercultural conversations. There are three pillars of the multicultural orientation framework: cultural humility, cultural opportunities, and cultural comfort. Cultural humility refers to providers' willingness to reflect on themselves as cultural beings and have genuine interest for the cultural backgrounds of their clients. Cultural comfort can be described as the feelings that providers may experience before, during, and after culturally relevant conversations with their clients and others. Cultural opportunities refer to the chances that providers have to engage in discussions about cultural identity and how these occasions are approached by the counselor, whether they are accepted or dismissed. Collectively, practicing within these areas can help us to provide better, more culturally relevant therapy. This means adopting a cultural humility mindset, taking advantage of cultural opportunities when they arise, and increasing our cultural comfort. Of course, practicing within a multicultural orientation is easier said than done, particularly when we're called on to reflect on our own biases and relationships to power and privilege, as well as working with clients from diverse cultural backgrounds. You may feel like you don't know much about that specific culture or intersection of cultures. Or maybe you do, but are still worried about making a misstep. We hope that this presentation helps to normalize these feelings, as well as providing guidance on how to manage and even embrace that discomfort when it arises. We will also discuss how you might be able to challenge anxiety related to your work with cultural humility in order to help you begin to build cultural comfort. In efforts to reduce anxiety around cultural differences with our clients, we must first understand our own beliefs, values, and attitudes within our own cultures. This can come with its own set of challenges, particularly as we consider what areas of our identities are associated with more or less social privilege. We'll discuss building cultural humility in more detail elsewhere in this toolkit and provide additional readings and resources so that you can more thoroughly explore your own identity, values, beliefs, and possible biases. But as you look at these questions, you might see how they could bring up some feelings of discomfort. These are deeply personal topics, and you may not have thought about some of them before. Another way to start to think about the nature of cultural identity is to consider this wheel, in which each wedge refers to an aspect of identity that brings you closer to or further from groups that are traditionally more powerful in society. You might start to recognize how parts of your own identity fall along the wheel, and the pattern of whether they are mostly close to the center or further away from the center. It's important to consider the role of intersectionality here. There are a lot of parts of your identity that make up your culture, and that can give you some complex things to think about. Again, whether you're just considering some of these areas for the first time, or whether you've already given your cultural identity a lot of thought and attention, it can bring up complex thoughts, feelings, and emotions. For instance, you might feel defensive, guilty, vulnerable, angry, or confused. You could also feel surprised, encouraged, grateful, and proud, or a combination of all of these, both positive and negative. What we want to focus on here is acknowledging the discomfort that's possible, even likely to come up, even if that's not right away, and how to manage those feelings. One provider told us, I once worked with an international student who was deeply concerned about fluctuating immigration policies that could prevent her from renewing her student visa. She told me that she felt frustrated that I would never understand what it was like to worry that my educational opportunities would be taken away from me. I would never know her fear. I felt so self conscious and anxious. Our first instinct as humans is to become defensive, to mitigate our own anxiety, and to protect ourselves. but I remind myself often that my anxiety makes the session about me, not the client. So I breathed. I thanked the client for her honesty and willingness to express her anger, which was actually a goal that she'd set early in therapy. I acknowledged that she was right. My privilege saved me from sharing her fear. I told her that her frustration and anger were valid and made sense. I vowed to better understand the legal minefield of being an international student so that she didn't feel the need to educate me. I leaned into our relationship, into naming the thing between us instead of my anxiety. My response wasn't perfect, but no one needs a perfect counselor. They need someone who won't run away from these discussions. I'm always so nervous to say something that might harm or offend a client. I care very deeply about my clients. But I think it is what goes unsaid that is the most harmful, an unwillingness to name things like the power differential, or to ask questions like, what does this identity mean to you? It is deeply vulnerable and so necessary to give things a name. What is it like for you to talk about that with a cisgender counselor? It's so important to give the client permission to bring these things out into the light. Willingness to meet the client in that deeply vulnerable space is healing. Acknowledgement is healing. Invisibility and pretense are harmful. In practicing within a multicultural orientation, it's important to be able to embrace the discomfort in understanding our own cultural identities, as well as your client's collective cultural identity, and how the different aspects of their age, gender identity, sexual orientation, racial and ethnic backgrounds, religious beliefs, and other salient characteristics might influence their needs and preferences in therapy. If you're able to embrace these uncomfortable feelings, both in exploring your own background and in being willing to have intercultural conversations with clients, it can lead to more culturally relevant practice, better therapeutic alliance, and improved treatment outcomes. Our clients are worthy of love and belongingness, and as providers, we need to model these values. Adopting this mindset can foster overall cultural humility, as well as giving you more confidence in making the most of cultural opportunities, even though you may not yet be fully confident, though cultural comfort may come with time. And again, we do all of this in service of providing better care for our clients. So, what are some things you might be able to do when these feelings come up suddenly? When recognizing or reflecting on discomfort, it's important to be mindful. Try to notice those feelings without judgment. We don't necessarily need to fix it or put a stop to it. Remind yourself that you're certainly not alone in having these negative or uncomfortable emotions and sensations. And because you have them, that doesn't automatically mean that you've done anything wrong or that something will go wrong if you bring up cultural identity. You might ask yourself what types of physical sensations you felt. For example, your heart racing, your hand shaking, or a knot forming in your stomach. Take stock of what thoughts come up for you, particularly any quick automatic thoughts. Finally, take a moment to think about those aspects of your cultural identity that are most important for you, and if there's a specific part of your culture that is most associated with the discomfort. Often, we have background thoughts, beliefs, and assumptions that we don't even realize are making an impact until our bodies give us a signal that our minds have identified some conflict. It can definitely be uncomfortable, but also an opportunity to explore and expand our multicultural orientation. Those physical sensations of anxiety, worry, and stress can be one of the hardest parts of engaging in this kind of work. But again, those body signals can be an important cue. This is an opportunity to learn and grow as a person and a provider. And remember, this is common, especially if you're just learning to engage in cultural humility. It may be helpful to practice coping techniques that you can use when you notice the same physical sensations start to arise. Some examples are the hand on heart techniques, a 1 minute meditation, and mindfulness exercises. Many of us use these in our work with clients, but these can also be good skills to use as you build your own cultural comfort. Avoiding cultural conversations and letting cultural opportunities pass by will likely make it harder for you to build cultural humility and cultural comfort in the long run. So, it's very important to try to challenge these feelings of anxiety and discomfort head on. Remember that cultural comfort is a skill that takes time to build. Once you've identified lingering thoughts, biases, or areas of cultural conflict, you could consult with a trusted supervisor or colleague to discuss your thoughts and reactions and how you might move forward. It may also be helpful to seek out readings and other resources to help broaden your understanding of areas where you've recognized assumptions or biases about a particular community. Bringing up the topic to your client could also give an important opportunity to center their lived experiences and perceptions. Are they different than you thought? Checking in on how your client sees your alliance and rapport can be important information for you to consider as you move forward. If they did notice a missed cultural opportunity or a disruption in alliance, checking in also gives you a chance to revisit the conversation and repair the relationship. If you're looking for opportunities to have cultural conversations throughout your daily life, you'll likely grow more comfortable bringing up these topics or being willing to explore them in your work with clients. Holding these conversations with friends, family, and others that you know can serve as good practice for testing what it feels like, how others react, and what the outcomes are compared to what you thought might happen when you felt most uncomfortable. Last, practicing reframing your thoughts or worries related to culture may help. Perhaps this looks like focusing on the opportunities or exciting challenges in working with diverse clients, rather than perceived threats of intercultural conversations or a sense of obligation. Coming up with one or two coping statements to think to yourself or have posted on your desk can also help provide you with a dose of positivity in these anxious moments. Coping statements can be a short phrase or even a single word that can be used to remind yourself of the truth of the situation. For example, this feeling is uncomfortable, but it won't last. Or, this feeling is a signal that I'm doing something new, which is an opportunity to learn and grow. For more information, see the handout Common Concerns for Cultural Humility in Therapy, as well as a resource list in the appendix of the toolkit.